changes, no changes to the track or the intensity. Now, if you're just walking in, I'm sure this is not a surprise to you because everybody's phones went off at about 2:30, 3 o'clock with extreme emergency hurricane warning. And that is enough to freak out anybody. Heck, the entire newsroom went off, and I looked at my phone and I started freaking out. The end of the day, all that happened is the recon, the hurricane hunters, flew into the storm and found winds about 5 to 10 miles an hour stronger, up near hurricane force. There's really very little difference from a hurricane at 75 to a tropical storm at 65. But at the end of the day, a hurricane has winds of 75 miles an hour. So that would change. That's why a hurricane warning was issued. It isn't that we expect a large area to see hurricane warnings and hurricane conditions. We don't. Matter of fact, we pretty much expect the same thing that we've been saying, a large area of coastal regions seeing winds of about 55 to 65, maybe some gusts a little bit higher, and then not as much as you go inland. If you look at the latest radar, the red box, that's a tornado watch. That means conditions are expected for the development of tornadoes. It does not mean that it's happening right now. It doesn't include Pasco, Hernando, and Citrus and Sumter. It will later on tonight once the storm gets closer and the bands begin to develop. That will be expanded north. There's the system. The center is nowhere near where all of that storminess is, and that is a good thing. It shows us that it's a sheared storm. It's being pushed off to the northeast, so it's not having a chance really to wrap around. We are seeing a little bit of lightning, though, in that little quadrant right there, so it's trying, but it's running into that shear, and because of that, we just don't expect any significant strengthening. But here's the thing. If this goes 5 miles an hour stronger, all of a sudden you'll get all these alerts, Hurricane Elsa now. There's just no difference from 70 to 75, still a tropical storm, and the end result for us is the same. A big blob of squally weather that comes in from our southern counties first, goes right through the rest of the Bay Area through the overnight hours. We have the wind, we have the rain. With this kind of a wind situation, you would expect power outages. We get power outages with our afternoon thunderstorms. Makes a lot of sense. We're going to see them when those thunderstorms don't last 5 minutes, they'll last 5 hours. This is the latest track, no changes. Track is meaningless at this point because we're not looking at a developed system that has a center and most of the wind near the center. The wind extends out 90 miles. And most of that is tropical storm force. Within there might be a few spots that could be up to 70 or 75. And if recon is flying around and happens to catch one at 75, they're going to bump it up to a hurricane. But for us, how it impacts us and you at home, it doesn't. The only way that would change if this went up dramatically, and at least at this point, that has not happened, nor do we think it will. So if you look at live radar, the bands are beginning to come in from the south. You see, there it is. There's that big area. The center is right about there, and it's still got some time that it could get stronger over the next several hours, even though I do think it's going to be impeded quite a bit as it gets closer to land. But storm surge is still our biggest issue, and we've been talking about this for hours. And by the way, we're going to be on all evening. We're going to be on all night, so you're probably going to hear this until you're tired of hearing about it. But at the end of the day, this is our biggest concern. I'm sure some of you are probably already tired of hearing about it, but the white color is the storm surge. And that is our biggest concern because you can hide from wind, especially tropical storm force winds. Usually you might see a tree down in a few spots. You'll have some power outages, but usually you don't get structural damage with a tropical storm or even a minimal hurricane. This is the stuff that's scary because you can't run from that water. And if you're staying in a spot that gets inundated, there's not much you can do. So we're looking for a surge of about 2 to 4 feet, maybe as high as 5 feet in a few spots. The timing of that will be overnight after the heaviest rain ends. And that's the part that's difficult to understand because you would think the two coincide. They don't. Speaking of rain and flooding, fast-moving storm is a good thing. The faster it goes, it means it's less likely to have more time to dump more rain over a spot. And here it is in terms of the timing. 7 to 8 o'clock tonight, we're already looking at heavy bands from Manatee and Sarasota County. 10 o'clock, heaviest bands move into Hillsborough, Polk, and Pinellas County. The center is right here. And that's so important for folks living on the water, okay? Because north of the center, the winds are blowing offshore. Remember with Irma? Remember when those offshore winds blew the bay dry? Remember that? It's not going to happen with this. It's not nearly like an Irma, but the winds were blowing offshore. And all of the winds north of the center will be offshore. Well, that's where all the rain is. That's where all the storms are. So as long as you're getting the wind and rain, you got to figure you're not going to see a lot of surge the way that this storm is shaping up. But once this part comes in, the center, right, and the winds come around, that's when you will see the water build. but that's after most of the rain and wind has ended. So it is a literal 1-2 punch. The first one, the wind and the rain. The second one, once that center goes north and brings in an onshore flow, that concerns us with water coming in. And boy, worst case scenario timing, the last thing you want to have this happen is at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, but that's what's going to happen. 2, 3, 4 o'clock, that's when most of Pinellas and Hillsborough and the Bay will see this. It coincides with a high tide. Fortunately, the tide is not as high as it was earlier today. It's about a 1.5 foot tide, so at least the water's about a foot lower. But boy, this is when we're most concerned about the issues with the surge. And then as it moves north, we still look at very heavy weather across Pasco, Hernando, and Citrus County. There's your center at about 3:30. Onshore flow down to the south, offshore flow off to the north. And then Citrus County, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then it moves inland as we head on into the early morning hours on Wednesday. So we'll be tracking this again all night long. Jason and I will be here. Greg's going to be coming in. The team's set for you. Any kind of advisories, any tornado warnings, anything will either be right here on air or streaming on our app. Guys?
All right.